Reba Dell is here. This is Benjamin B.M. Smith, Daphine Causey. B.M.'s here with Margie, and Daphine's here with her daughter Sharon DuPriest. Rod Ivey, many of you know. All of these people have traveled with someone that we'll hear a lot about during this session, Miss Ruth Brown. We often hear about people without whom Sacred Heart singing wouldn't be the way it is today, right? People who supported singing in various ways, and I think everyone who goes to singing is supporting that singing. But one thing about this camp that I've heard people talk about, I've heard many people talk about, is that there's a lot of young people at this camp from places all over the country where singing has only recently spread. I am no longer officially a young person by the camp standard, but I certainly wouldn't be singing if Sacred Heart had not spread to so many places. And one big piece of that, one big piece of why that's happened is because of countless, well, surely not countless, countable, but many trips by bus, by car, by train on occasion that were organized by Ruth Brown, who lived not far from here. I want to say just a word about how this came together, and then we're going to watch these pictures, and I'd like each of you, as we show the pictures, and chime in, please, with people you see or stories that come up, and then once we finish the slideshow, we'll just, I have a few questions, but I also want you all to just talk and tell us your recollections of the trips. The Georgia State Convention in 1976, it met in Roswell at Oak Grove Primitive Baptist Church, and it was more or less like an ordinary Sacred Heart convention, except that a bus full of people from Vermont showed up. The bus was painted in psychedelic colors, and the singers were dressed, the singers that poured out of this bus were dressed as you might expect people to be dressed who came in a bus in psychedelic colors. In 76, exactly, that's it. And they thought that they were going to give a performance. They were on a tour. They were a group of people who had started singing early New England music in the Sacred Heart, and they thought they were on a tour. They had made an arrangement to attend, and as far as they would perform at this convention. Well, they found themselves at a Sacred Heart stage, which is not something they experienced. And over the course of the weekend, several of them led. The convention did have them as an ensemble perform about 3 songs from the center of the Hall of Square, which I think was received really well by the people who were there. Some people who were there had told me that everyone wanted to talk to them at the break. People had come from far away to singings before, but this was something different. And it emerged over the course of the day that this group of singers were going to go to Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut, to give a concert that October. And so the idea arose, well, why don't we make that a Sacred Heart singing event? The people in Middletown at that time had started to sing. There were some early singers in Boston. And so the idea emerged, why don't we try to bring those people together and have a singing of sorts? Well, Ruth Brown, who was a school teacher who had been organizing field trips already for about 30 years for her students, going to places like Washington, D.C. and New York, stepped up and had also been organizing some trips for parents, for alums, for friends, stepped up and put together a bus trip. About a week-long bus trip that Daphine was on to go to this first New England convention. A total of 45 Southern singers, 44 from Georgia and Alabama, 1 from Florida, went to that singing. And there's a recording of that singing. It was released by Morning Trumpet. It's called Soar Away. If you read the liner notes, it's not said anywhere what the singing was. The sound of the singing is a Southern singing in a really resonant space. But the order of songs sung happens to match the minutes of the first New England convention. And if you think about the odds of calling a certain number of songs in a certain order, it's definitely that singing. So if it weren't for this bus, that singing wouldn't have sounded anything like what it sounded like. What it sounded like was a really strong Southern singing. And so what might have been a concert instead was a singing convention very much in the model of what had been happening down here for at that point over a century. These people went again and again and again and again and again over more than 20 years to dozens of conventions, dozens of locations, helped singings get started, helped, I think, ensure that these new singings followed the traditions that we've been talking about all week here. Just through their presence, through being able to share the traditions. As I think you will hear, they were also lots of fun. So
I didn't have much.
Yeah. So I think that's basically all I have. She's lots of fun. Lots of fun.
Do you know how many bus trips that they were?
I don't know how many bus trips there were. It would be interesting to try to do a count.
4 of them.
Huh?
There was
Were you on 4?
You were on 4 of them.
Well, you'll have to chime
Actually,
in.
you have to
too.
tell us about it too.
there was one a year for many years, and they went up to 2 weeks. Some of them lasted more than a week. And then there was always one to Chicago, a separate one.
Yeah.
It
So
was
I think
3
that there
days.
Vermont too.
Yeah.
That one day.
Yeah.
There were long trips. I mean, at the very least, there were 40 or so.
We didn't sing in that one, but I was something of 32 states we went through, or were in one time on a bus trip.
That's awesome.
I mean, we went every direction.
But 1976 was the first.
The first
trip.
The first, well, sure. You know, the first bus trip that Ruth organized to was singing.
For singing.
Because prior to that, there weren't really any singings to travel up to, right?
Yeah.
Because the New England Convention was, you know, there was not a singing in Ann Arbor in 1972 or 3. But this was the first northern singing. And this fall, of course, will be the 40th convention. So the impact of all these trips, and of not just of Miss Ruth, but of all the people that went on these trips, is the current international state of sick proxy that we have, which is why it's worth talking about. So this is kind of an odd question, but like what? Why did you decide to go on bus trips? Or why did you, or not bus trips, why did you decide to go on these trips that Ms. Ruth organized?
She wouldn't quit aggravating me. We only every time I went to a sing.
Every time we went, she was planning to go somewhere, and all I didn't want her to go. I know that it's gonna cost so and so, and get your first down payment in by so and so.
Would she, so she would announce them as singing?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Would she talk about it? Would she like?
And she was calling, she would also call.
Oh, yeah.
She'd always tell that she had to have so many slots left.
For years, I'd take mom and daddy down there to Fort Wayne to meet
Yeah.
Joyce and Jeff. I'd always meet them down there. Kmart,
Came on.
Margie Smith.
Yeah.
And I'd go back and get them.
Huh. What made you actually go on the trip when you finally went on the trip?
It was the last one that she had going to Missouri. I don't know, I just wanted to be a part of it. I waited too late this year.
It was a way, when I lived in Margie, you would see a bunch of country and meet a bunch of folks we'd have never met. Never seen.
That would not hurt. Yeah.
If the bus was coming, they all looked forward to it. They knew they'd all have a good singing.
Yeah.
When they seen that bus come up, everybody was all excited at the singing.
The only long trip we got to go on was, I got there with agents last minute to England. But we went to Chicago a couple of times, but we got a family business. Well, we had to run it so they could go. And so there, we didn't get to go on, but we would have loved to.
Oh.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask about, and maybe Reba Dell, you can talk about this, or I'll agree you can talk about this, is just a little more about what was Ruth Brown like, you know?
Well, she was entirely different than what you would think by seeing her at a Sacred Harp singing, because she was a retired school teacher, and she came across as a school teacher. But when you go on a trip with her, it's entirely different. She was not straight-laced or anything. We went to see Battle back in, I think it was 2002 or 3. Shelby and Jeff taught a singing school out there. And there were 7 of us flew out there. Miss Ruth, Jeff and Shelby, Bill and myself, and LaRue Allen, and Floyd Wild. And when we got out there, we got lost, naturally. And Jeff was supposed to be the navigator. He went to sleep. Bill was driving, and he was just completely confused. If you know Bill, he's pretty excitable. I don't know if he's in here.
He's in here.
But then, we went to the, what is it, Pikes Market? Shelby and Miss Ruth could not walk around like the rest of us could. So when we got back to where they were just laughing like crazy. And they had threatened for Shelby to get up on a trash can and dance, and Miss Ruth was going to play the trash can. And there's a lot of other things I could tell, but
And this might be a good time to ask about the food at the first meeting convention.
Oh, yeah. For the food, we went to the table, and there was a basket of apples sitting at the end of the table. And right up on the end of the table was a whole turkey. It had not been sliced or anything. It was just a cooked turkey. And of course they had potato chips and things like that. But some of us didn't go very far on the table. So we were singing that night back at the, wherever they were having the singing of some auditorium. And the couple that we were staying with, we had another couple with us, a Mr. and Ms. Hanley. I don't imagine most of you knew them, but they were from up north Alabama or something. But Jimmy and I and them went to this particular place, and they were very nice, but they were going out that night, and they told us just to come on back from the singing. If they were back, they'd pick us up. They just lived a couple of houses down from where we were. So when we got through singing, they were not anywhere to be found. So we just walked to the house, and we walked on upstairs. They had told us all where we were asleep and all. And we went on up to bed. We later heard them come in, and we heard the gentleman say, well, I don't know where they are. I said, I better go back up there and check. So Jimmy got up and went to the door and told them that we were there and already in bed and we were fine. So they got up and fixed our breakfast the next morning and carried us back to the city.
That picture of like Jap and Joyce singing on the bus, what were some of the other things that people would do to entertain each other and themselves?
We all would sing. We all would sing some.
Jeff, our teacher, really sang in school, and would sing several songs.
What would his singing school be like?
Kind of comical, but.
Hey,
And they had a funeral for a fly.
I heard they had funerals and trials.
Yeah.
Funerals and
And trials.
We got
Yeah,
one place, and somehow or another, several flies got on the bus. So they went to kill them, and somebody found a match box. They put the flies in the match box. So on that while we sung a couple of songs, Jeff took the funeral. We put the
He
flies
could
in the
get
match
the dad is preaching better. Did I do there?
Yes, he could.
Then we had the trial. I don't remember what the trial was about.
Well, Elaine had stolen this. Miss Ruth had a bunch of artificial flowers, and she would hang them up on the luggage rack if it was this side to get off the bus first. And when we'd get back on, she'd switch it, and this side would get off first the next time. So I believe we were going to Missouri. I can't remember which it was, or Chicago. Anyway, Elaine had been reading the newspaper, and she just laid it down in the seat next to her when we got ready to get off. And somebody, I never knew who did it, but they got that 4-leaf clover and slid it under the newspaper. And when we got back, somebody had stolen our 4-leaf clover. So we accused her of stealing it. And then Max was that the trip here?
Yeah, this was Chicago.
He was the lawyer for Eileen, and she found and Jeff was a judge, and I was a character witness. Let's do it.
What was the verdict?
She was guilty.
Guilty as charged.
Yes.
So one of the things I did want to ask about that you're talking about, and maybe you and you, Dundee, and anyone else can, is you know, these were trips to a singing, ostensibly, but they were 8, 9, 10-day trips, 7-day trips. Yeah, and so, and I guess I wanted to know, you know, just what were, for all of you, what were some of the neat experiences outside of singings? You know?
You remember the Rock House? We went through
What
it.
was the rock?
Big rock, they had a house on it. Had a carousel in there. I mean, it was a big cave really on it.
Do you know where it was? In Virginia?
It was out west.
Out west.
House on the Rock.
Oh,
I think there's a tourist place in the north part of the Midwest, it's House on the Rock. It's got a big carousel.
yeah, there's a big carousel, merry-go-round carousel. That stood out to me.
If we happened to be traveling on Sunday morning, we had church.
On the bus?
Yeah, and, go ahead.
We got started on the bus, just have somebody read scripture, and then you got prayer, and sing.
Well, BJ had a song, and I thought I would remember that was the prettiest song.
BJ.
Ever.
Because people don't know who these people are. So
Well,
say
I'm
just a
sorry.
word about what Billy Joe Harris was like.
I'll tell you his favorite last note.
Okay, let me just say, before, Billy Joe Harris gave a comedy routine at the banquet celebrating the introduction of the 1991 edition.
Yeah.
Okay? A comedy routine.
And he had Alzheimer's. So at the end, he could only remember one thing. I woke up exhausted this morning. What happened, BJ? I dreamed I was a muffler all night long. He would tell that every
He talked real slow, but you know it, you and
You had to hear him. Anybody else would tell a joke and it wouldn't be funny.
You're right.
You could tell it,
You're right.
it make you laugh about it,
His voice and all of it, just went together.
And Evelyn Harris, whose name you might see on a memorial lesson in scenes, who died just recently, was his wife.
She died.
But she censored his jokes. She wouldn't let him have them.
Tell a joke, he'd look at her and give her approval.
I just,
Yeah.
I gotta say, that's one of the greatest pleasures of my life, to hear B.J. Harris tell a story.
Oh, yeah.
Any comedian or Jesse Clark or anything like that, it was nothing compared to that.
So one other thing I wanted to ask was like, when Ruth Brown would be planning a new trip, how would you all know about it? Like, how would she actually plan the trip, and how would you all get involved? Like, how would you decide to go?
On your way back, you would ask him, tell 2 or 3 places in that. You'd ask him where you wanted to go. And then she would make plans to fit that, wherever you wanted to go. If you wanted to sing on the way up, she'd work out where you go, where somebody's having to sing. You want to sing on the way back? We stopped one night and sung in the hotel lobby. They all gathered down.
Oh, Lord, I can't.
I don't remember it. A lot of it I don't remember, some of it I do.
But like singers from that area came and sang with you.
Yeah.
They would know where we're coming, because she'd get word to them and then call the group together and we would get the plan.
she had the trips planned out where we were going to eat and to stay, and she and the bus driver, Johnny, usually, he ain't been around driving and knew his way around. We got to Chicago one night.
We rode Dempsey and Upster to death. There's 2 streets up there, one to Dempsey and one to Upster. We were going the other way. Our railroad unpassed it, the bus couldn't go through, so we all got confused. Bus driver and all. Didn't know which way to go.
We had to turn around and go back around somewhere. Judy Cottle, is she in here? You all know her. Okay. First time I can't see her at a singing or two, but I did not know her really. So she was going on a trip with us. So I had to pick her up. She was on the side of the road.
All the way to Fort Payne.
So when she got on the bus, Miss Ruth was introducing her to me. I would usually sit on the front row there, and her place was by the side of me. So when Miss Ruth got through introducing her, Judy says, "Yeah, I've heard about her." I said, "Johnny, stop this bus and put this woman out. I'm not going to put up." And she didn't know me from Adam.
We went to Chicago, and as she said, we'd seen each other at Saint's, didn't really know each other. They made us roommates, and I found out after we got to Chicago that she'd had 3 heart attacks and 17 operations. And I was in a panic. And I had no idea what she might do.
A couple of people have mentioned, Miss Daphine, you said you didn't know Judy Caldwell at the time. I mean, you sung with her, and then I think Philip said the same thing about Rodney. Do you think Miss Ruth's bus trips encourage not just singing with other people up north, but also encourage people in the south to sing with each other?
I think so.
Absolutely, because I didn't know Louis Hughes had sons.
I didn't know him.
You know, I didn't know Moeen and Evan,
Yes.
so.
You met a lot of people from here and there.
Okay.
You wouldn't have normally met if it hadn't been for the bus.
And spend time with them. You see people that sing, but you don't get to spend time. Just like him, before we get to spend time with each other.
When you get on the bus, you got to spend time with them.
Yeah.
For those that didn't know Miss Ruth, I think she was 96 when she passed away.
Yeah.
And she was still planning trips.
Yeah.
So she was an older
Yes.
lady at this point. She wasn't,
She
she
was
was
in
a
her
retired
90s.
school teacher.
Her husband had a stroke, an incapacitated stroke, and she took him on every trip.
Well, she had a seat taken out and his recliner put in the back of the bus. And the men would help her carry her in and the first
There's a
one.
lot of things we can't tell because there's time to play it. What happens on the bus stays.
So police may come up and get her.
Well, I think we all really appreciate you all coming here and sharing these stories. I want to appreciate Pam and Philip, as well as and Eugene. Thank you. And everybody else. Thanks to Karen for bringing pictures, and especially thanks to Reba Dell, Rod, Daphine.
Well, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming and sharing some of your